On Christmas Day, we released our 10 car trek adventure, the Oregon Fail, where we were overlanding the Oregon Trail in bad off-roaders. And looking back on the last 3 years, being able to go on 10 of these incredible trips, building 10 or more cars to try to figure out different stories to tell and different things to do, it's all thanks to you guys for watching and the sponsors for making it happen. But in the ideation of what the next car trek is going to be, a lot of conversations happen, and they usually begin with one of us saying, all right guys, hear me out, what if we do cheap supercars? Because that's really what each of us do in our daily lives, and that's always the easiest thing for us to think about. But we want to offer some kind of diversity, and really Car Trek 6 was our first time to really try that out. Because we did cheap sports cars, then we did cheap family sedans, and then we did cheap off-roaders. And when you look at what it really takes to not only do the trip, but to capture the trip and be able to produce a finished product about it, the hardest thing to capture is off-roading. Now, we always wanted to do off-roading, and we always wanted to do it in bad off-roaders, because that's always on brand, but it's a hard thing to make visually compelling. And for this year, we had a little bit of a limitation, because we had decided that we were only going to do 2 shooting windows for Car Trek, one in the spring and one in the fall. And in each of them, rather than trying to put together a 5 or 6 episode series, we were going to do 2 different concepts each time that would each come out to about 3 episodes. First one that we did, going to Monterey Car Week, was wrecked supercars for the price of a new Z06. And we just saw Tyler Hoover buy a new Z06. Freddie's got one on order. I am not buying a Z06. But regardless, we had a lot of fun in that. I took the R8. And the second one that we were going to do was to go up to the Pacific Northwest and do some off-roading. And so we looked at different concepts. We just knew that generally we hadn't done anything in the Pacific Northwest. We wanted to do something off-road. Now, a mistake that we made, a very dangerous one that we did in Car Trek 6, is that when we drove up the mountain in the ski slope in Breckenridge, Colorado, we didn't really know what we were doing. We didn't tell anybody we were going up there. It is technically a road, but then we had the first blizzard of the year halfway up, and we barely got back down. And so we knew for this one we needed to have kind of a Sherpa, someone who was a veteran of off-roading the trails of Oregon, that we would make into the Oregon Trail Adventure so that they could help us to get unstuck when we would inevitably get stuck, and make sure that we found the best trails for the time that we had to shoot. Because keep in mind, we're going to build what's effectively 3 episodes, which ended up being released as a feature-length single episode special in 5 days or so. And that's really, really hard when you think about how long it can take to shoot some of these scenes. And we're carrying a crew of between 12 and 15 people on one of these trips, and sometimes the production is $20,000 or $30,000 a day. And so we have to be sensitive to that. And again, it's only possible because you guys continue to watch it and you keep going to Auto Tempest to search for your cars and using the Ticket Clinic to fight your tickets. So please, please do right now, click on the links in the description below to let them know that you love Car Trek and you want us to keep doing it, because I promise you, we want to keep doing it. But as we looked through the ideas of, all right, what kind of off-roading are we going to do? The idea of taking unqualified off-roaders started to make a lot of sense. And now we do a scene where we all pull up and reveal our cars to each other, but I'll be honest with you, we do know what cars we're all going to bring. We obviously get there somehow. We shoot these scenes, and so it's not totally blind. And so I knew that Tyler wanted to bring the Meth Maserati, and Freddie had mentioned wanting to do an all-road, and Tyler had actually helped Freddie find the all-road that already had the suspension swapped. It was a manual transmission car, had 1 million miles on it, and Freddie had been able to paint it and prep it a little bit, as Freddie does. So I wasn't really sure what I was going to bring. I loved the Cayenne off-road. I still love my Cayennes for off-roading, but that doesn't really fit an unqualified off-roader. But around April, I got a phone call from John Ficara. And John has a perhaps unhealthy obsession with 6-wheeled cars. He loves 6-wheeled race cars. He loves 6-wheeled everything. And so he called me and said, hey, Ed, will Premier Financial Services finance for me a car that isn't in the US yet? Now, that poses some problems because the car's not here. It's not easily insured here. It doesn't have a title here. And so the answer was really no. So I have to burst his bubble a bit and say, unfortunately, there's not a great way, barring like a home equity line of credit, to finance a car that is in Europe. We got to get it over here first. But as he described the car and the fact that it was actually 4-wheel drive rather than 6-wheel drive, and it was a gas engine, so it was not going to be the torquey diesel, which would be great off-road and not that great on the highway. It would be nice on the highway, except if you were going up the hills of Oregon. And so even though we could show up to what I described to him as the planned car trek premise of bad off-roaders on the Oregon Trail, this fit really well. It was going to look amazing and then probably not do all that well off-road. And he said, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Eventually he wanted to convert it to 6-wheel drive and stuff like that. So I said, all right, why don't I buy it? We'll use it for car trek. You can help me prep it, which was very self-serving. It meant I didn't have to, and I didn't have to bother with shipping a car from the East Coast to the West Coast. He's already in California. This seems perfect. So I said, if you ever want to buy it back from me, John, you're welcome to. If not, we'll use it, decide if we fall in love with it, and if not, we'll just sell it because I don't have room for it. I know he doesn't generally. And so the course was set, and he went through the purchase and the importation process. Now, the car had run through an auction in Paris and not sold. And that's kind of when he'd heard about it and started to explore what the car was. Now, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, in Europe, there were several different companies, including one called Carmichael, that were legendary for converting Range Rovers into all sorts of things. Certainly 6-wheeled cars, primarily to become fire engines, but also off-road safari vehicles with opening canopies so you could stand out and shoot tranquilized lions or whatever you do in Africa. Also, there were some for falconry, where they would open the roofs and have these elevated seats and your falcon would fly off and do its falcony thing and come back and land. They also did some convertibles, extended limousines, and things like that. And so there were some done for individuals like this car that weren't necessarily designed for, commercial use, so to speak. And this car had been built for a Paris art dealer. So unlike a lot of these cars, there were no additional seats. There's just this gigantic rear area. And that was because it was used to haul around these amazing works of art in France. Now, I don't know what great works of art were on it, but probably some that are considerably more valuable than the car right now. And it was going to be expensive, right? It was not going to be a dirt cheap Range Rover, Sam Hard style, because he had actually found me one that Princess Diana had driven, but it was totally in like rusty shape. And so whatever, this one was going to be about 45, 50 grand to buy it. And then you got probably 10 or so in export and duties. And then we were going to need to prep it for overlanding. And he had some great ideas of taking kind of that camel trophy heritage, put gigantic roof rack on it and badge. It was just going to be awesome. So I loved his vision with the car, tons of lights. And I said, sure, let's do it. So I don't know, I ended up with 75, 80 grand in this thing, but I'll tell you what, you drive it anywhere and it has all the presence in the whole wide world. So as we were shooting the first Car Trek series, the one that was ultimately Car Trek 9 in August, we went from Thunderhill Raceway down to Monterey Car Week, and Ficarra brought this. It was actually at the Concours des Le Mans where Tyler destroyed their PA system in his 458, and so it went around and it was just the perfect support vehicle. It runs great, it drives great, it looks great, and it's honestly not that gigantic. It looks huge, but when you put it next to like the TRX support truck that we had, they're about the same size. So it fits in parking spaces, it's pretty easy to drive, but that rear axle is totally unpowered and totally vestigial. And as I learned the first day of filming with this car, when it was lengthened, it wasn't really sealed. And so we were obviously filming on open plains and dirt roads, and the dust was unbelievable. Obviously, it doesn't have air conditioning and things like that. So I had everything just, closed off, but it was still just fogging in this dust from the back of the car. And I gotta say, it was brutal. A very, very unpleasant thing in that way. So the next night we had to take everything out of the interior and duct tape all the holes and caulk everything up and seal it. And the next day it was a little bit better. And that's kind of what tends to happen is, you think you've done all the things to prep it, but there were certain circumstances where you just couldn't tell. And so this was one of them. So we go on, and of course, being an old Range Rover, the low range and the diff locks didn't usually work. And so since then, John's been able to go through and service them up. But usually I was only one-wheel drive if we were off-road, especially if we low-centered the middle axle. Because you can imagine if your rear axle does nothing but drag you along and you go up a hill, it lifts the center axle off, you have no traction, and then you're only relying on one of the front wheels that may or may not decide to participate. And so I got stuck a lot. Fortunately, we had a great winch on it that John had installed. The lights were great. The car just was awesome. It was very, very hard to make go places, but we had a blast. It made for a great adventure. Tyler's Maserati was stupendous. You'll see that. Freddie's car was predictably terrible, but it went a whole lot more places than we thought it might. And as always, we just had an amazing Christmas adventure that happened to have been shot in August. So I'll be honest with you, we don't know what is next for Car Trek. We haven't come up with great ideas. We're kicking around a lot of different things, but if you've got any ideas for next Car Trek premises that you'd like to voice, please comment with them. We always love to hear it. You know, sometimes we can listen, sometimes we can't, but it's always fun to hear your ideas and to bounce ideas back and forth amongst ourselves. And I'm not sure what the future is for the Range Rover. In the meantime, John Ficarra sold several cars and bought, as he should, a manual Murcielago. And he loves that thing, but as he was doing so, I was like, isn't some of this money supposed to come back to me to buy me out of this Range Rover after we're done filming with it? And so he hasn't decided that. I haven't decided how much I want to give it up. It's one of these things that I wish I had room for, because when you take it anywhere, he won a trophy at Radwood already with it, because it's just so cool. So I have listed it for sale. I don't know what's going to happen, but if you would like to be the next owner of the six-wheeled legendary Car Trek Range Rover, I think it is still the only six-wheeled Range Rover in the US, I wouldn't mind you having it, and so I'll put a link in the description to an ad for it. But either way, thank you so much for watching Car Trek. If you haven't already seen Car Trek 10, go over to Freddie's channel and check it out and let me know what you think. As always, thank you to Auto Tempest and Ticket Clinic for sponsoring Car Trek and sponsoring VINwiki. And thank you to this month's sponsor, Glossit, for offering their best DIY ceramic coating deal ever. For just $69.99, you get a $200 value of their graphene ceramic coating and their ceramic detail spray. It's an amazing set of products. I know you'll love it. I love using it on my cars. So check them out now at the link in the description below to thank them for their support of VINwiki.